Hey, we're live. Man, that was a lot of preamble. This is episode 150, This Life in Tech. I'm Jason.
Still the bad guy, but I'm a little bit more positive bad guy this week, but I'm still the bad guy, Dan.
And I'm still TK.
That was 12 minutes of warm-up. Are we even going to talk about what we wanted to talk about, or are we done with that topic already?
No, we might, otherwise we'll roam for another 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, because where we left off.
I'm actually looking to see if there is something like that, because I want to know.
All right, because what we wanted to talk about was productivity suites, like Office suites, and how companies make feature decisions. Like, what do you add? What do you remove? Remember when Word went from like the classic interface to having the ribbon bar, and that was a huge transition, and now it's kind of stabilized on like a hybrid, I think. But anyway, in particular, the scenario I was setting up was I have a document that has left-right flipping margins, and I want to be able, like Dan, you had a perfect analogy. In PowerPoint, all type of presenter type apps in a productivity suite, you can shift or control select multiple slides at once and apply a style to just the ones you have selected. Why can't I do that to document pages in some type of Word, Writer, Google Doc interface? Because I've never seen a way to select pages. Because you can also do it in the spreadsheets, right? You can select columns or rows, shift or control, and you can apply styles just like you can to a PowerPoint. But you can't to pages in a Word document, at least that I've seen. And so that makes me curious. Like, you have this established workflow. You're training users on how to use it in a user experience, but it doesn't carry over to all the applications.
I would say one of the things I just off the top of my head that while you were talking, I thought about, if you look at Word is not necessarily intended as a book writing tool. Right? There's a lot of book writing software out there. There's Manuscript. There's a bunch of other, specific to writing books. And Calvin, and I think you guys before, when you were talking about doing your dissertations and getting into, I think Dan and I talked about it at length, getting into multi-hundred pages, Word became very cumbersome to try to manage that process, right? And so I don't think that tool is necessarily built for that process. So maybe that's why they left some of those, formatting / style options out of there. One of the things I'd be interested, because you were saying you were using LibreOffice, is what if you're not Cooper and you're not really familiar with this, using LaTeX to do it, because that gives you have ultimate control over everything you do in there, and especially if it's going to be a technical manual, because it's very formula friendly. But that whole
now we properly get into Jason's transition for the book.
But that might be a thing. But I think in general, you look at something as cumbersome as I left that one alone, Dan. We looked as cumbersome as book writing. Do you think? I don't think that falls, squarely in that Office productivity suite genre or application, right? But I think when you do talk and say, hey, how do we select and pick what goes where? I think that's an interesting discussion, because I think for the longest time, Microsoft was the industry leader, and probably still is, and they definitely still are by volume. But you could, like, if you're going to say, hey, we're working with a big marketing firm, I might rather use Keynote for my presentations to set up, because I think they look better, right? And then now, Dan was just saying the other week that Sheets in Google Docs has less known formula errors. Right? And think about that. Think about the financial markets of the world are largely run on Excel, and we have known errors formulatically.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
I say many brilliant things. I just forget about them all the time. They're just, to me, they're just normal things.
And we're back.
Another way to describe that
waste of a week, Jason.
Another way to describe that is you just spew bullshit.
Maybe, but So I just checked. So there is a document map in Word. Problem is you can't select multiple pages.
Right.
They have to be continuous.
It's all or nothing, right?
Right. And so you're right. If you really want to write a book and give it that nice look and feel, the latex is very distinctive the way it looks. That's the way to go. And like within our department, we do almost all of our tests, quizzes, exams, written documents in LaTeX. And so that's definitely an option. I don't know what a productivity suite is supposed to be. I mean, what's the limit of a word processor? It's a word processor.
Right.
And so that's one thing, right? Like when you design it, you have to understand, I think, what its inherent limitations are. And, like I know Dan and I, the problems we had and other people had too with a dissertation or a 100, 200 page document is when you get into multiple styles that change between sections. That gets really hard to manage, and particularly in Microsoft Word at that point. I don't know what it's like now because I haven't done it.
Oh, the worst part though is I was doing mine I can't remember if I was doing mine on Windows or Mac, and you were doing yours on the other. And every time I would send it to you and you would open it up, it changed all the formatting. And I remember when you're like, dude, I've told you like 10 times to do blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I am fucking doing it. So then I started sending it to him in a PDF. And I'm like, see?
Because that's
that's
convenient to convert 200 pages to a PDF real quick to shoot it out to your proctor.
Right. Well, and it was insidious because it wasn't like a style change. It was the way that, because I'm going to go off now for a minute. One of the things that bugs me is word processors that insert spaces between lines and paragraphs. No, fuck you, stop. I'll hit return. I want control of that like a typewriter, man. And maybe that's why I feel that way, because I grew up on a typewriter. But I'll control the spacing. Don't do it for me, bro. You're just messing things up.
I'm in charge of me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's insane. Just you're on the most up-to-date version of Microsoft Word. So at this point, there was no real like Office 365 type thing. So I'm on. Like I said, we were both, Jason and I go back and forth between different operating systems. So I don't remember which one was which, but one of us was on the latest version of Word for Windows. The other was on the latest version of Word for Mac.
Yep.
And when you opened it up in the other operating system of that version, it completely changed the style guides.
But
yeah.
Do you remember back then before O365 really, because O365 was really starting to take place when we got to Silent Circle, right? They were really starting to integrate that whole thing with the cloud-based version as well. Mm-hmm. But before that, think about the disparity between the Mac version of Word and the Windows version, and largely by design, because there was this big rumbling that, once again, Apple was going to really try to invade the enterprise space, right? And I think they held back and finally just realized, hey, let's become, and I think with Satya Nadella, is let's become platform agnostic and make our product great wherever it works.
Yeah. Well, right, because again, getting back to like decision making and feature selection, that's like one of those things that bugs me. You have an application or a suite of applications that works on most platforms quite well, and yet the individual feature, but the individual features between them aren't the same. They don't look, and up until recently, they didn't even look the same.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? And so you're stuck supporting what seems to me, I've never been on the inside or looked at it, but at least somewhat divergent code bases. So that has overhead associated with it.
Right. I'd say the biggest disparity, I think, in Microsoft Office between a few years ago, I think before Windows 8, maybe, and even 8-ish and somewhere in there between 8 and 10, they finally got it together, was Outlook. The old Outlook for Mac was anachronistic forever. And it was the one thing that they didn't upgrade, almost like they were trying to drive power enterprise users to get away from Macs and get on Windows machines. And
remember, it was actually called Entourage. It wasn't even called Outlook.
Well, it was before that. It was after that. It was kind of Entourage was barely functional, right? And but it's insane, that now all of a sudden, boom, they all look the same and they all work. And I think that strategy, globally on anything, that strategy is like, hey, we're going to be platform agnostic, and we want our user interface, no matter what machine you pick up, to have the same feature functionality.
Well, because
do you think mobile drove that? Right, when they really went all in with putting the Office suite on mobile, do you think that drove at that point? What was their primary design decision? Well, we've made it, whether you've got a Mac, a Windows, iOS machine, or an Android machine, they look identical now. Do we might want to come in for the big win on the core OSs? You think that was part of their decision tree?
I think so.
I'd like to think that any of these people that they say they want to, in terms of the application developers, they're like, oh, we want this application to be, platform agnostic. I think they're all lying to themselves. I don't think they really do, because they have a preference for the operating system that they're coding it on, things like that. And naturally, they are gearing it towards what they believe it should really be run on. And then the other platform gets less features, or it doesn't work all the same way.
Sorry.
And I can tell that by, like, if you take a look at, Word as an example, or, I mean, even the way the installers work for, and I don't mean because of the operating system, but the look and feel is not the same. Even for Microsoft Office, for Outlook on Apple versus Android, they don't look the same.
Right.
So I basically think they're all lying to themselves.
I think when you look at the OS, you look at what Microsoft has done in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, they've made a big shift to go from, hey, any hardware manufacturer that wants to buy our operating system, if you meet these minimum parameters, we know that our OS will work on your computer. Here, have it. And then, basically every machine has it. To we now consider our Microsoft machines to be the flagship of Windows machines, and that drives, I think, some of the behavior, especially when you say, hey, Apple has always been that way, right? We have what we have and it works. And hey, if you can figure out how to work with us, you can come and play, right? And I think now you're seeing a distinctly Windows flavor. And I think like Lenovo for business, you walk in, but I go into companies and I see these, a lot of people, now it's the Windows Surface Pros, and they'll plug them into a bigger monitor with a keyboard, and it gives them the portability they want. And it gives them the functionality they want when they're in the office, and that's fantastic.
I was going to tell you, so the Surface Pros are a great little, toy, but these keyboards, like if you're having to travel, absolutely suck.
They're not all that in the bag of chips.
Yeah, and then the Surface Book, which I think is an amazing product. That thing weighs like 50 pounds.
I know. That thing is heavy.
What? I mean, we've got all these things that are out there, and you've got, Microsoft. I mean, it's a beautiful and nice device, but why? I mean, did they not have anyone help them with manufacturing? I mean, Microsoft's a relatively big company, I think.
Is that the one Microsoft machine where the monitor detaches from the base and you can turn it into a tablet? Yeah, there's that thing. That's a lead lineman, right? That's the one.
And it's a nice device. I mean, it's powerful.
Yeah,
but it's like, hey, how about we get something that's kind of thin, lightweight? I mean,
like the Pixel.
Dell has one, HP has one. Yeah, the Pixel Book is a great example. I mean, it's like, what are you doing?
Well, it's interesting to me because if I go back to like the first startup I worked at, and we did e-commerce platform, and it was developed in Microsoft technology. This is like the first generation of .NET. It was routine at that point to force users onto a specific browser and browser version. So you didn't let people use whatever they wanted because you had to control how their browser interacted with your web app. And that was super common, man. Super common. If you're not running IE 7, fuck off. You can't use our site. And that was the attitude. To now, where it seems to me that the development, maybe they are deceiving themselves. I won't disagree with that. I don't know. But the paradigm is one code base run on maximum number of platforms. I won't say all, but maximum number of. And look, you can see Microsoft has done this now too, because now they have the .NET framework for Windows machines, and they have .NET Core for cross-platform. And if you do stuff like C#, business app development, it'll work the exact same way on every platform that can run that .NET Core framework.
Do you think that's the reason why Microsoft is moving to a Chromium-based browser?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that's part of it, and I think the other part of it is they realize that Why try to compete in that space?
Come
They
on.
were so after Balmer, they were so far behind in pretty much every vertical, in my opinion. You can't compete in all of them.
I kind of look at a web browser as being like this. You want to, you're trying to choose the restaurant, and the browser is the equivalent. You're choosing the restaurant based on the type of silverware that they allow you to use.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's a
Right.
great analogy, right?
Uh-huh. Well, the Chromium engine is used in so many different browsers and like web stacks that pretty much the standards now, the actual web standards, like the JavaScript language, the TypeScript language, so forth and so on, are all built basically to work specifically with a Chromium engine.
Well, if you look, you go back earlier when I can remember using like Firefox 4, right? And then you had other little Firefox variants like Flock and all these other they were taking the Mozilla open source stack and they were building different browsers, right? And now I think probably one of the coolest things lately, if you're going to say, hey, I've just got to not be that guy to use, because there are people that like whatever the standard is, they got to flag against the paradigm and go, is Brave. Brave is a really cool little Chromium-based privacy browser that actually can get annoying if you're trying to use G Suite, because it says, oh, they got all these cross-site scripting. Well, yeah, you have to cross-site script to link all of the different functions of G Suite together to make it work. And if you don't, it's basically unusable. And so I would also submit that you're not going to get a largely unknowing user. Hey, I really like G Suite and I'm going to use it. He or she are going to use Chrome. But when I first started doing it to separate some of the work I was doing, and the first time like nothing works, I'm like, oh, that's right, I got this hardcore blocker going. And again, like in the old days with NoScript on Firefox, I love being able to check out why it wouldn't work. Now I have a better understanding of how G Suite works. Most people don't care about crap like that, but I think they're doing a really good job. But the point was that a lot of that, hey, I want to be different, but I want a browser, used to take place in Mozilla, and now it takes place at Chromium.
Right. Yeah. I just find the paradigm shift interesting. Well, even as an educator, we just had a long discussion about languages, which languages to teach through our core classes. And
Spanish,
English.
and talking about like intro to programming, the second programming, advanced programming, those 3 core classes, that's an easy conversation because there's main language paradigms, okay? And you can't really go wrong. It's more of, what are you trying to do? Where it gets messy is when you start talking about web development. That's where it gets messy. Basic web technology.
It changes too fast.
Well, right. Yeah. And so you can say, and this is kind of what you were saying, Dan, I think, about people deceiving themselves as developers. It's one thing that I think the 3 of us could agree, hey, especially with our experience at Silent Circle, it makes sense to try and maximize the amount of platforms your code base can run on. Okay. I agree with that idea in principle. How you do it gets messy. And so like you can have like a full JavaScript stack and you can use that set of tools, but now you're locked into that. Or you can use, like, I'm a fan of the Python full stack, but now you're locked into that. And yeah, they can run cross-platform. You got to jump through some hoops, and it'll work. But I go back to how
he's a Ruby on Rails kind of guy.
Yeah, sure.
Dan just
Sure
put the white glove off and went.
No, let me just do everything in Go, because why not?
Yeah.
since I'm on the Google's golden tee.
But I mean, the reason why I say that is like, all right, so you have these projects like Ruby on Rails, which was someone's likely graduate project or something like that, and it hits the mainstream pretty quickly. Then that particular project team graduates, and then it falls off the face of the earth for the most part. All right. And so I think there's a big challenge when you start with web development. There's all of these trends that fall off too quickly. And how can you really get someone to turn one of those things or not? And I would imagine that the better thing would be to, if I can teach them 3 different computer languages for the 3 different types of systems we have to deal with. You've got back office, middleware, front end, and then at that point, they should be able to easily expand into anything they want. So, you've got your C sharps, you've got your Pythons, maybe you're utilizing, Java, .NET, whatever, type programming, but teaching them those three mainstream that are pretty much, steady eddies, they can go learn whatever the next, there's already another Ruby on Rails. I just, I get tired of following them, but whatever the next Ruby on Rails is.
Well, I think that also tells you why there's so much volatility, because remember the big thing before Ruby was PHP.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, man, these things have merits. What this always indicates to me, though, is the amount of volatility or the lack of stability in the language platforms, if you want to look at it that way, is because that vertical is not mature, right? Nobody goes off and writes operating systems in crazy-ass languages. There's a reason why.
Right.
Because we've learned over decades and decades of OS development that there's a pretty standard way of going about it to make sure it's stable and it works. You know what I mean? Web's not like that, man. It's still kind of the wild, wild west.
It's also
What's that?
Like, it's also a cost thing. Like, if, and this date is probably 8-10 years old now, but at the time they were saying that Ubuntu, if it was not an open source project, it was just massive contribution from the open source world, it would have cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $7 billion worth of man hours to get it where it was at. Right.
Yeah, sure.
So, and what finally happened? Canonical got bought, right? Because they reached critical mass. Right. And there were enough people that were wagging their tails in April and October to get that operating system. And I used to be one of them. I love Ubuntu. Right. And when you talk about the perfect mix of usability, plus if I want to get under the hood and mess around with it, that's what should be on every kid's computer, not Chrome. Right. Because if you're going to say we want to think, because all the kids that want to do something, they can go do it there. Right. Yeah. But it's an expense thing. And why do we got to reinvent the wheel? Right. I mean, you guys brought up the thing, like right now, if you look what you said before, like we used to build stuff, and it's one of the reasons that XP stayed in the government so long. And it was just mind-boggling thing is like we started, once we said, hey, as a military, for example, we're going to have computers and we're going to use them to do all sorts of things for us. Not connected to the internet generically at the time, back in the early 2000s, but we're going to use them to accomplish all sorts of tasks. Then we started to get electronics that we're bringing on the battlefield that needed to have stuff loaded into them, be updated and things like that. Everybody had written all of the little applet, little tools that needed to talk to those devices for XP. Mm-hmm. There was nothing in contracting, because we can't think ahead, that said, hey, whenever the next operating system comes out, you have to upgrade your little applet to function in that operating system. And so I was actually told this. I don't know the merit of it, but that was the general excuse. It was like, why are we sticking around with XP? 7's been out for a year already. It actually works. The government, rightfully so, said, Vista, nice try. We're going to ignore you. And so did Microsoft, because it doesn't even appear in their history of what they did. And that was baffling to me, that it's largely blamed on a contracting error why we stuck with an operating system. I'll give Microsoft credit. XP was around for a decade. That's amazing for an operating system. But what it did was it caused everybody to build bolted on systems. Not bolted. Bolted means you can change it on. They would spot weld from the back end of the user. And that's why you were stuck using certain browser versions and everything else. Now, the modular method says, hey, I'm going to have what we commonly refer to where I'm working now as the engine, like the core engine. All right. If you want to use our product and you want to do it in MATLAB, we have a way for you to turn around and plug in and use the engine, but use the interface that you're comfortable with. And that's the way we're building out everything. And Cooper's doing a great job of that. But
what's interesting you said about the aspect of an operating system staying around for a decade. Almost all of Microsoft's operating systems lasted for a decade.
Yeah,
Windows 8 and Windows Vista. So basically, their odd number ones are the ones that lasted for a decade. Like Windows 7, its end of support is in January. It will have been around for just over 10 years in support.
Well, and I'll tell you the other difference that drives the volatility in the web stack is anybody, I'm convinced anybody can learn how to build a full stack web app, and it's not hard. It takes a little bit of time and it takes a little bit of tinkering and some patience, but man, it ain't hard. building an operating system in the traditional sense is fucking hard. There's a lot to manage, and it's really low level, you know, and it's not even tough. It's something different. And so who's going to sit around and create a kernel? I mean, the last person that did it was Linus Torvalds, and that was how many decades ago? You know what I mean?
Right.
Nobody does that. That's not where the experimentation happens anymore. And in some ways, thank God. You know, the world has progressed to a point where I had 2 students on a grant this semester that at the beginning of the semester, in the middle of August, knew nothing about web app development. Right now, on Monday, we're getting ready to release our alpha, and it's an app that the Mayo Clinic's going to use.
That's badass.
Nice.
And,
So
and they were able to go from A to B.
So think about this. This is something that's kind of, to me, like mind-boggling. Here we've got Linux, we've got Apache, we've got things like this. And these people that worked on that largely did it all as volunteers while they were being paid full-time by someone else. So they essentially were able to be more productive in their free time than they probably were in their full-time job that paid them.
Because they had no constraints on their thoughts, right? They were just like, hey, we're trying to build better. We're trying to build better, right? I'm not trying to sell it. I'm not trying to do anything. And it's Cooper. I mean, Cooper is, or it was, the ARM kernel maintainer for the entire Linux community, right? And he's, I mean, if you ever go to a Linux thing with him, you want to talk about rock star, you know, I'm just going to carry your bag, sir, right? You know what I mean? Like, who's that guy? He's the guy that lifts all the heavy shit I don't want to pick up, right?
Right.
But that, I mean, he is in that level where, you know, they go to these Linux conferences, and then there's the private event at night where all the, you know, the top tier of Linuxers go. And I mean, his commits would effectively go right to Linus to get approved, and he'd be off to the races, right? And he was super productive with that because the methodology of turning it around, it was all like-minded people that were trying to make something great, and the best idea won, not the best idea that can get you paid.
Right. Right. There's something pure about a tech-based meritocracy like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you have the personality for it, which not everybody does. Which reminds me, hey, Dan, I meant to tell you. So for my lab that I'm building, I got, you did a lot of work with like Catalyst chassis back in the day, right? At XM Radio and shit. Mm-hmm. So I have the new 9407R. Boy, was that like riding a horse and getting in there. That was fun. Just standing there with... Man, that brought back good memories. I could even smell it, man.
Could you repeat that last D?
You were talking about the best idea wins, like that kind of thing. When I was at Blackbird, Cooper had invented this thing that was really cool. It was really effing cool. And so we were up in DC at the headquarters, and we're showing it off to the leadership team, our VP, and then the 3 owners, and a bunch of folks kind of meandered in. He had stated right at the beginning that it was a beta. We're just showing you how it's going to function. We still have some work to do. It's going to take about another month. Well, Cooper's roommate from college also was an engineer at the company, a different department, and these two had known each other since their freshman year in college. And Louis got in there, and he started pounding on Cooper about, this doesn't work. Why are you using this? It's not secure, blah, blah, blah. And finally, like, my boss was like, what's he doing? And they go, he hasn't gotten the brief that this was a beta app. And I walked over, I leaned over and really quietly, because he's becoming the obstacle to us presenting this. I'm
right.
Like, hey, Louis, this is just a beta. You missed that part in the brief. He just goes, sorry, man. And then he shut up for the rest of the time. At the end of it, he's like, hey, man, that was my bad. It was really cool. And Cooper's like ready to choke him out in the corner of the room.
Oh, man.
Hey, you want to take a dangerous turn about languages?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Okay. So my daughter takes German. And
nice.
Her teacher.
Are you saying that Germans are dangerous?
Well, let me finish, Daniel. I'm going to go mom on you, Daniel. Daniel is next. My mom used to start off short and get to my whole name. And by that time, my dad had his belt off, and we were ready to go to the No. So, and I think in German, because of the historical context that we view the Germans through, in the U.S. in particular, that when my daughter tells me stories about German classes, she loves learning German. She loves the teacher. Frau is awesome. She's a great lady. I met her. So what a great educator. They have to pick German names for their to have during class if they don't have one, right? And at least one of the boys always wants to pick Adolf. Well, apparently you're not allowed to do that, right? And so every joke that they have revolves around the Holocaust, right? Or something to that effect, right? I'm a big believer that if you want to take something that's in life, I'm a big believer, if you want to take something that's horrific and get it out there and establish that it's horrific and make a baseline so it can never happen again, you have to talk about it in the open. You can't hide it. It's the reason the Germans have put so much time and effort into turning concentration camps into living, breathing museums of atrocity.
Yeah.
Jared, when he went to Germany, when he was in high school, went there and he goes, it changed his life, right? Because you want to be on the ground to see how other humans can treat other humans, right? And Eisenhower did a great service by saying, when he came over the hill, he said, hey, everybody get as many cameras and people in here and videotape this thing, take pictures, because 70, 80 years from now, some damn fool is going to say it never happened. What do we have now? We have Holocaust deniers, right? My point is this. From what I'm told, Frau tries to mute that. But obviously, she's been teaching German for a long time, that she also understands where the kids are at, right? Because when the kids answer questions, they raise their hands like this, right? In class, and they do stuff like that, right? And they will look, like when it gets in, they'll go too soon, right? She's like, too soon, right? I'm a big believer that if you can look at the worst of humanity, and you're not making fun of it, but you recognize how to classify it and treat it, now you've understood it, and now you can process it correctly. If we try to repress it like we try to do today, because we don't want people to, we're going to hurt people's feelings, they're going to get triggered or whatever. When you oppress it, and I'm not talking about telling another human, you're a bad person, things like that. I'm saying we have historical context on things. Let's talk about it in a way that brings it out. And I think that they do that. So how many kids today? They say like 66% of people in the world don't even know what the Holocaust is. Kids, which I can't even like wrap my noggin around that.
That's crazy.
I know, but it's like, what are we teaching kids today, right? But if you can use dark humor to advance the concept that something was way off base and atrocious and abhorrent to human life, why wouldn't we do that? Why do we stifle that?
Sure. Well, it's interesting you bring that out. I had 6 years of German, 2 years in middle school and 4 years in high school.
Yep.
And I don't think any of us, even though maybe privately we goofed a little bit, ever thought about in class. And we had a German teacher,
right.
Fräulein Oberlin. Man, and by the way, she was cute. And I don't think anybody ever once thought about anything like that. Well, but here's why. Contextually, I started learning German not too long after the Berlin Wall came down.
Right.
Like that was fresh in everybody's mind. And you might have privately thought about it. Some of us might have joked about it on the side. You know what I mean? But no, I don't remember any of my friends ever thinking that their name was going to be Adolf.
Well, but that's, you look.
But it's culturally different.
Right. That's you get in there and it's like, and I think that from what I've been told from Joanna listening to talk to her friends, that Frau handles it the right way. She's like, no, you can't do that. Right. And the next question is, are Germans not allowed to name their kids Adolf? Right.
Yeah, sure. Right.
And that's especially like a freshman. You take a 12, 13-year-old kid and you go, well, wait a second. If I can't pick that name in class, is there a law against that in Germany? Right. No,
which is a good question.
Yeah. No, but it's probably considered to be in bad taste.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm wondering about the aspect of what you said. Is it 65% of Americans, or do you think 65% of the world's kids?
There wasn't specific. It's one of those little blurbs you hear, and you got to go. I got to go dig deeper. But
I wonder if, like in China, that they talk anything about like the Holocaust, or in South America. I mean, we spend we pay a lot of attention to.
They better talk about it in Argentina and Brazil.
Well, but maybe I have no idea if they do or not. But I have a couple of Brazilians that are in my my class at the MBA, which I'll be heading back to Ann Arbor. I'm going to ask them.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to whether or not they spend time on it, because I mean, we spend time on it quite a bit, and for good reason. But I wonder if in other countries that were that were maybe not directly involved in the fighting in Europe,
Yep.
if they did.
No. I mean, well, look at Japan. Like, why once the Arizona Memorial was built, and then Hawaii became a huge tourist destination for the Japanese. A lot of it was a historical sojourn, right? Because they weren't taught what happened in Pearl Harbor. They weren't taught the same story of the war that we were, right? And you go to, on any given day, if you go to the Arizona Memorial, you're likely to be the minority being an American there. That you're going to have a huge contingent of Japanese people there. And in the same way that we had soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that were a participant in that event, a lot of the Japanese have come over to see, what happened that day, because they know what they participated in, and they know how it was translated to the people after the war. And in that case, I think once the emperor decided to, you can stay if you come off the deity piece, that really helped the world move forward.
Yeah.
That in saying, hey, we're here to. And I hear this in Kosovo when I go there a lot. Everyone from the dawn of time that ever made it into Kosovo, and at the time that was an arduous task because you had to get past the mountains, right? They were there as conquerors. They view us as the first country on earth in the dawn of their time. They came there as their liberators, right? And we've done very well with that. When we've deviated from that as a nation, we've not done so well. And it's one of the reasons we have great relations with Germany. We have great relations with Japan, is because we came there to liberate them and put them back as stable, good partners in the world, right? And even now,
well, maybe Japan.
Germany's in a tough spot. Germany with the EU right now is in a really tough spot, especially with Brexit, because if you remove England's participation in the Eurozone, Germany, France, and England are the only three nations propping up the euro, right? The whole Eurozone is being propped up, right? And what happens? Like countries like Kosovo and other countries that are good citizens of the world and want to participate in a larger sense in Europe, what's your economics like? I mean, that's got to be the first thing, because at some point Germany can't support all of Europe, right? And if the worst of humanity comes out, they're like, wait a second, we were going to do this in 1945, and everybody stopped it.
And lest this be an example that they can't do it,
right? But that's what I mean. There's that's the crazy part about it, right? And you look at most of the Northern European countries, they accepted a lot of immigration in the 70s and 80s. In particular, they started really because their populations weren't having kids. Like you go to Norway, you go to like the Baltic, not the Baltic, but you go to Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. English is the primary language there. Their native languages are starting to die, right? I mean, even now in Kosovo, they have a big American school population that if you have any resources at all, you send your kids to American school. I was sitting at a restaurant one night, and a girl about 6 years old hears me speak English, comes rushing up to me, and I'm kind of sitting on I'm sitting at the bar having dinners and by myself, and she comes up and grabs onto the chair and gets like up onto the rails of the chair and starts speaking in her words American to me, and she has perfect English. Her little sister, who's about 4 years old, comes up and again perfect English and starts telling me a story about something that's big, and I'm like, well, how big was it? She goes, it was ginormous. I'm like, you're an English speaker. You're an American. I ended up talking to mom and dad. Came over like, hey, don't bother. And I'm like, no, it's fine. I mean, these little kids want to learn English, right?
Yeah.
I'm so shocked that they have little kids in a bar over in Kosovo.
Well, it's a restaurant. They just meandered over to the bar. You got to be a little bit older than 6 to drink there. But Dad was like, I missed an opportunity there. I was going to move somewhere. But the thing is, like, they go to school and they don't speak Albanian there. Right, and at their recess time and everything.
Is that the native language of Kosovo, Albanian?
Yeah. Yeah, Kosovo Albanian. You know the singer Dua Lipa?
No.
She big pop, like my daughter Jorah's age. She's a big pop singer. She is she's Kosovar by birth, and so she's a huge. I mean, anybody that breaks out of there and goes to America is a huge thing. Well, there's the Kosovo Albanian accent, and then you have the Albanian accent. If you go to Albania, all the cool kids want to have the Kosovar accent because of Dua Lipa. And there's another young artist, I can't remember her name. She's coming out too, and she's going to break big here. But it's that concept that now they were considered the lesser than because they were on that side of the the border, and now they're the cool kids in town.
Right.
All right. Right on.
Well, it's I think it's going to be one of the long-standing struggles of humanity now is how do you retain some type of regional or localized identity in a global society?
Right.
Because think about this. When we were kids, if you wanted to understand how Germany taught German history through the world wars, you had to either have somebody that was close to you that was German, that was exposed to that, or somehow learn the language to learn about it. You don't have to do that now. Dude, it's one search away. I'll pull up a German textbook that's been translated.
Right.
Instantaneously. And you can actually answer that question for yourself if you so choose. So you're not dependent on anybody because of the technology we have.
But that's okay, so this goes to the larger discussion, right? That we have at our fingertips in this period of time, we have the greatest access to information in the world. Yet we still have a propensity to watch cat videos more than anything else.
Yeah, right.
Right. People how does that work? I don't know. If only there was a way I could figure that out. Right.
Well, here's one of them because it's some people. I mean, well, not just this, but a lot of people are just stuck in their own mindset. They can't. Yeah. And this is, and so you guys know, and I certainly appreciate all your old stories that you brought back to me for this leadership class I had to take, which was great. And it really challenged a lot of my own internal beliefs in terms of how to do certain things. But a lot of it largely I knew, and it became glue. And
it reinforced what we're already leaning towards.
Right. Yeah. And some of those things so I had roughly 30 some stories I had to read. And largely as part of that, I didn't want to read any of them. I actually became very anxious when it came to that time to read these things of people writing something about me. I know that I did a lot of these things not because I wanted to feel good about myself. I did them just because I felt it was the right thing to do and to help someone. Except I want to take one of them back, and I'm going to read it on air. This person, I hope I never help again. No, I'm only joking. But this is what let me. You all can guess who wrote this, and then I'll fit. Well, so we had an hour to read these stories. It took me an hour and a half to read them, and I had to read several of them over and over because I could not. It was too emotional, to be honest. I couldn't.
Yeah,
I
sure.
had to myself. It was difficult. Really difficult.
It's like opening an old photo album, right?
Yeah. So this one person wrote, "This one time in your MBA, you made me participate in this bullshit self-empowerment exercise designed around what I can only guess is to soften business leadership to cater to the millennial generation's overdeveloped sense of self-worth. I believe my response was to kick you in the nuts, dump a shot of bourbon down your throat, and push you back out into the fight that's called life." Who do you think wrote something like that?
I mean, my first guess would be Ian, but the fucker doesn't know how to write.
There were misspellings and punctuation in there.
Oh, okay. That's my guess.
So I'm going. I'm sitting there thinking. I'm reading this. So that was, of course, the first thing that I read, which was probably good because I went, all right.
Made you laugh. Right?
Yeah. But and so I feel like my goal now is to try to get Ian, and it has been for a while, to understand that every person needs something a little bit different in order to evolve out of their shell. And so as we're talking about these, how we're we're losing a lot of our localization and local identity because of a global world. I think if you lose that, you're actually going to hurt the global world, because you lose that center and that focus of what it is that your community brings to the overall larger ecosystem.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree 100%.
Tribes linking with tribes, not everybody becoming one big tribe.
Yeah, there's a big difference. Yeah.
And and it's like, you guys hear me say this all the time. It's like everybody's equal; they're just not the same, right? And we don't want cookie cutters, right? Innovation gets stifled, compassion gets stifled, all the good things in life get stifled when you have everybody thinking the exact same way, right? You want the contrarian. I want the contrarian thought to be delivered respectfully in the workplace, but I want to hear it, right? And sometimes respectfully is like, shut the F up, right? We've heard it yet.
Sure.
Right? Crazy man, right? But you can deliver those without actually delivering it like that, right? Or, the personality of your people, if you're a leader and you're like, hey, that guy, if I just say, hey, I've had enough of that for now, he's not going to get it, right? And then you might have to get a little bit more terse with them. But I think that everyone's equal. They're just not the same. If you get that in your head, it helps you to look at everybody through the prism that they're presenting themselves to you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. You can think about it like going to visit other worlds.
Mm-hmm.
If you really take the time to listen and get to know somebody and try to imagine the way they're approaching things, however bizarre it may seem or backwards or whatever the case, you want to apply to it, man, it is another life form. And we have we have way more in common than we have different.
So get this. So when I was a little kid, my dad grew up in rural South Carolina, like as a poor as could be.
He was a sharecropper, wasn't he?
Well, his family had land, and they had sharecroppers on the land, right? And so they'd all be out there working with the hired help, all of whom were black, right? And so he grew up in the rural South in the 40s and late 30s, early 40s, right? And
it's 1800. So for those who want to know.
Thank you. And but pre-Reconstruction, so my dad was a very quiet dude, but he was also a very gentle man, right? And never had a discussion of race in the house. Never heard a bad word about race, any of the adverse terms that are associated with people that you think grew up in the rural South in that period of time. And then as I got a little bit older and could kind of construct in my head right and wrong, my dad would say, he goes, there's a million reasons to hate somebody. If you start with the color of their skin, you're missing a really good opportunity to find a good reason. Why don't you get to know them for a while first and then find a reason to hate them? Where in reality, what he was saying is, hey, once you get to know somebody, if you get past what makes us different, you're going to find there's a whole bunch of time that's the same. But again, that's telling me, right? You can tell me what to do when most kids are observational, right? So it's the reason there's an awesome responsibility as a parent. There's an awesome responsibility as a leader, right? Because I can stand up in front of everybody and tell everybody what to do. But if I'm not living that, then they're going to go live what they see from me, and they're going to live that observation, right?
Right.
Fast forward into high school, and all along the way, my dad was a very giving, helpful human being, and we went on a field trip somewhere for a few days in high school I don't know for what, but I came back and we had a huge Puerto Rican population in our high school because they emigrated to the country to work in the plastics factories, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so part of the welfare system in Massachusetts in particular, because they're all state-run at the time, was that when you showed up there, you were given a place to live and you kind of got on your feet. Well, as you were there and you started, they moved you to successively better housing as you got work and stuff like that, and so you were off on your own. Well, while we were in the trip, the folks came and they just moved this family. We got back and this kid, like my dad, we drive him to where he lived, and there was nobody living there. And so now my dad, who's the executive of General Electric, effectively takes 3 days off from work while this kid's staying with us to find his parents. Mm-hmm. Right? That to me is leadership. Right? And then you trace it back to when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and saying, hey, if you're starting with the color of somebody's skin, you're missing a good opportunity to really like them, right? And it's really what he said. And
Yeah, right.
that has stuck with me forever. And I've traveled the world pretty extensively. And it's always carried me well to walk into a situation and say, hey, I'm here. We're here to help. I'm here to learn about you.
Right.
It's a tremendous asset that I was given as a child.
Yeah, it really. I think I tend to think of it this way. It's the same thing. Really, it really evened things out for me when I started to approach situations with the assumption that who I was talking to knows more about what we're talking about than me.
Yes, always.
And so what that does, at least for me, is it forces me to ask questions rather than make statements. And through that, then you get to know somebody, right? And you can start to study how they think and how they approach things, and you can find common ways to solve problems. That's what I like so much about working on big problems.
Well, really what you're both saying is in life, you get a lot more energy out of creating those high quality connections.
Yeah.
What you do is if you just start off everything and being negative. And there's a ton of research talking about just having that positive first attitude changes like everything, even internally chemically about you. People who are generally positive aren't sick as often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I posted this on Twitter not too long ago, but basically someone that is overweight, smokes, and excessive drinking, all three of those things, they basically decreases your life expectancy. However, if you're around and you're involved in negative type relationships, that is worse than the other three combined.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a thing. And I was coaching somebody up not so long ago, and it was, it's because I get better at this. I get older, and you try to be concise in your messaging because you want to get people right when you start to engage them, and you listen to their story, and you want to be able to say, okay, how can I quickly grab you? And if you're negative, if you're fearful and you're angry, you can't succeed, period. Right? Because you put enough internal negative energy in yourself that when you walk into a room, you're going to say, hey, we got to go here. We got to do this. Well, you're basically saying, you guys are going to do it because I can't, because my energy is thing. But if you work with people especially when you talk about like saying millennials, Gen X, and Gen Z, and I think Silent Circle is a great example of getting a lot of young people and doing some very productive things, because for the most part, all of us there that had some sort of leadership responsibility showed up every day and were excited to work with these young people because they were really smart and they were working hard, right? But if you work from empathy and accountability, if those are your two things, and if you show up and you're grateful, right? I'm not telling you to be happy. I'm not telling you to be joyful. I'm saying if you're grateful, right? If you can show up in a position of gratitude and you have empathy and accountability as the method of your leadership, you're going to be successful, because it's going to allow you to walk into a room and say, hey, first of all, I don't know everything, right? If I did, I'd be a one-man company and you guys wouldn't be here and I'd take all the money off the table. But we're going to spend 60 to 70% of our resources on paying people, because we need great people here to be successful. And I want to, through context of decision-making, empower you to be great. Right? Whatever that means to you, I want you to be great. And I want to help you do that because you're going to help us do that. And but it's through accountability in and out. What I find is the hardest thing to impart on somebody is when you tell them that and you tell them to be transparent, and they're going to be like, well, I'm not telling them about the finances. And I'm like, whoa, it's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to give yourself. You can delegate authority. You can't delegate responsibility. The more authority you can give away, the better the idea train is going to be. Right?
Yeah.
And you have to be the living example of what you're asking for. Because if you're not, it's just not going to work. Right? And then we'll work on ways to start creating positive energy within yourself and to get to the point where you can walk in and be that person. And one thing I told a guy, because I observationally, he walks in and, hey, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about 2020. And here's what I think. Worst thing you can do, right? I want great ideas from people. It's my job to say, hey, the discussion tomorrow is going to be what we're going to do in the out year, 2020 and 2021. I want to hear from you. So be prepared to tell me tomorrow. And you walk in and you say, all right, let's go. And you reserve your opinion. You reserve the outwardness of your opinion for the end. Because now you're not tainting people with the bosses. Well, this is what the boss wants to see. And you drive everybody like cattle into that lane. Now people can come to you and you can get bigger, better, expansive thoughts. Right? And that, I think, is when you kind of you jump into another level of leadership, because now you know it's not about you.
I agree. Well said. Any final thoughts, Dr. Ford?
I concur.
I'm gonna from now on, Dan, just to get everything going next week. After you say I'm the bad guy, I'm going to say I'm the ancient one.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's gonna be my new tagline.
Oh, I like that.
Should. The ancient. Yeah.
The ancient. I like that. We can put that on a T-shirt.
With a black and white outline on my face with just a gray beard, and underneath the ancient one.
It'll look like Jason's M&Ms.
Circa 1836.
1836.
I'm holding together okay for being 145.
Not too bad.
Modern technology.
The blood of virgins.
I have a buddy, SEAL buddy of mine. He's literally he's an anomaly. He drank. Well, I don't know what he's doing today, but the time he drank it, but he smoked like a chimney all the time. They kept smoking all the time. But he ran track in college, and when he was a BUD/S instructor, and I wasn't. We went to train together, so I wasn't at BUD/S when he was in. I wasn't out there, and he's a thing. But the legend goes, he would walk out with the students, and he'd be a little wiry dude. He'd walk out, and he'd have a cigarette in his mouth. He'd talk. He's like, all right, let's get this going on. Like all pissed off because he's got to go walk out. He just chuck the cigarette in the sand and squash on it, just take off and let him try to keep up with me, right? But he was getting his. We were looking at pictures one day, and we were all in a group, and so I was like, "You're looking pretty good for your age." And like my buddy looks, he goes, "I'm looking pretty good if I was, I don't know, 145 years old." Because what did he do? Like I said at the beginning, he got ahead of himself on the disparagement, so we couldn't take into him.
That's right. Yeah. Always be out in front of the message.
Good offense. And like I said, Friday, I'm going to be in there. I'm going to get in there early verbally.
You have to. If not,
go in the corner and suck the thumb.
All downhill.
Go in the corner and
go downhill from there. So. And we know, like, if you fall down at your age, a broken hip is the leading cause of death. So,
Hey,
it's a pretty traumatic injury.
Yeah. I'm working on my osteoporosis. Leave me alone.
I hope you're taking your calcium pills and stuff like that.
Vitamin D supplements.
Oh, yeah. I already did. Along with everything else to keep me young. All right, my friends. I'm sure I'll talk.
All right.
But see you here
next Sunday.
Next Sunday. Hey, I'll think of something.
Hey, are we doing our a New Year's Eve show to put all of our predictions out there for 2020?
We ought to, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe Dr. Ken will actually come on, since I don't know what he's doing on a Sunday at 8 a.m. that he's not able to get up. I mean, especially he's not playing golf because he's his shoulders all jacked up. Maybe he's too busy standing in line at the Apple store just to see if there's anything new every week. I don't know.
You're hard up when you gotta attack people that aren't even present.
Hey, every time I see anything about Apple AirPods, I always send them the link.
Speaking of which, let's don't make fun of people in absence. Let's get Ian to come on the show.
He won't. He refuses.
Really?
I would love to.
I'll talk to him.
I would love to have him on.
He's got a face for radio and a voice for TV.
I'll tell him if we don't make him do any spelling bee, maybe he'll come on.
See, here's the thing:
he doesn't have to spelling bee, and he doesn't have to define shiv and shank.
That line is the funniest line ever. When I walked in and looked at him, I go, "Hey, is shiv or shank the verb?" And you're like, "Look who you're talking to."
This is how you know he's full of shit, though. He'll do it because he was on the History Channel.
Was he?
With the night thing. Right? So he's been on TV. This the idea of he doesn't want to be on camera. He's just being a prima donna, dude.
What night thing? He just doesn't want to be on camera with us because it'll be a train wreck for him.
Right. See, the issue is that all he was having to demonstrate was the fact that he was basically a lacrosse player in college, right? On here, you have to be able to withstand the intellectual debates that ensue constantly, and I'm not sure he can keep up unless you want to talk about now Microsoft Azure or AWS, because he's still streaming Azure.
Hey, he's got a burgeoning young career with that because of Stoney.
Yeah,
he literally went to the altar of cloud computing with Mr. Stone and walked away a humble man on his journey. He's killing it now.
Yeah. And that was all because of a 5-minute conversation I had with Stoney, because everyone else there on the tech team was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm like, don't think so.
Don't let the accent fool you. Don't let the accent fool you.
Yeah, I've been around a lot of cats, and this dude knows what he's talking about. And Ian's like, oh, this cloud stuff, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you need to go talk to Stoney. I mean, he's just sounding, he's like, only millennials want to use cloud computing.
My thing now is like, how many hundreds of millions of dollars a year does the Intel community spend on cloud networks because they're not secure?
Yeah.
Right? That's every CISSP that's a GS15 that's got 4 years to retirement and doesn't want to have to learn anything new.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the government of that space. That's what it is.
We should try to get Ian on, man. I think it'd be a good conversation. Yeah. I have questions.
We'll get him on after the new year when he's all fresh and
unpolluted by the days.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, my friends. Next Sunday.
Same time. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.